Hello, and welcome back to Russ's Movie Corner. My name is Russ, and as you can see, I am sitting in front of my movie corner. I have my Guarding the Galaxy t-shirt on, my King of Kings movie right next to me, and judging by the non-frame around me, one second, there she is. We're taking on Emma Thorne, an atheist, again. This is the Christian's school textbooks debunked video that we've been tackling, and when we last left off, Emma was chatting about how many Christians today like to characterize the fight between evolution and creation as, you know, there's creationists over here and there's evolutionists over here, and you know, nobody, and there's not really much in between. And I mentioned that because she goes, well, then, you know, the Christians don't try to acknowledge that there's Christians that believe in evolution, but they also believe in creation. And what I brought up was the fact that if you try to read into this creation story that there is some kind of if there's millions of years or even thousands of years in between each one, then you start to have heresy, because you start to put death before sin. And the first instance of death in the Bible is in Genesis chapter 3. After God pronounces judgment, he kills some animals to make leather clothing. And I mentioned that leather clothing was, very durable for back then. It would have been, they wouldn't have needed to go out and buy, or make a whole bunch of, they wouldn't have had to go out and just kill a bunch of animals to make more clothes. They would have had simple garments that they would have been able to wear. And that kind of started the whole trend of people wearing clothes. Okay. And then I mentioned that also that they used the fig leaves, which wouldn't have been very practical for covering themselves, because as the leaves dried out, they would have gotten scratchy. If they'd had any kind of allergic reaction to them, that would have been really bad. So, having leather clothes just would have made more sense. Okay. So, let's jump back into this and let's continue on.
It's just, I wish I could take those kids and be like, hey, here's a religious scientist that studies astronomy. Please listen to them and their worldview to understand that you're in a cult, basically. Because they've got no way of knowing. They've got no way of knowing, especially if they're being homeschooled on this system. Oh, that's why I hate it so much.
Okay. Yes, there are plenty of Christian scientists out there. In fact, I can put down in the comments, or in the description section below, I will put down a link to a couple of books that feature Christian scientists who believe in the literal six-day creation story. Okay? The book is called In 6 Days, and there's another one, I think it's called The Seventh Day. It's basically like the continuation of In 6 Days. So In 6 Days is 50 scientists, okay? You have geneticists, biologists, chemists, mathematicians, you have a whole physicists, astrophysicists, astronomers, who all believe in 6 days. Okay, the papers that they cite, that they write for this book are very, very technical. I don't have the book myself anymore. I need to get it again. Once I finally get some more money, I'm gonna buy the book. But it's really, really good. And then they made a sequel to that, which was, I think it was called The Seventh Day or something like that. And again, the link will be in the description. But it basically has, it basically is like 50 more scientists, okay, that believe in a literal 6-day creation. Because, again, the more they study this evolution theory, the worse off it gets. Now, there are some astronomers out there who, yes, do believe that, that look at how far away distant objects are, and they think in their mind, I don't know how their light is reaching us if the universe is only, 6,000 or so years old. But they're few and far between compared to the scientists that actually know what they're talking about. Now, another channel that I would recommend checking out is Answers in Genesis, okay? Answers in Genesis, run by Ken Ham. A lot of those people are actual physical scientists. They actually work in different fields, okay? One of them being Dr. Norm Jeanson, okay? I've mentioned him many times on this channel, okay? He has a book called Traced, okay? And I'll put a link down to the video there. I mentioned this last week. I don't think I put the thing down in there. But basically, what Traced does is he found out that through the male Y chromosome, okay, that they could trace it back. They could trace back the lineage of any person on the planet. They could trace them back to Shem, Ham, or Japheth off Noah's Ark. And by extension, by Noah, which means that if we can trace them back to Noah, then we can trace our lineage back to Adam and Eve. Okay? So that means that with that story alone, okay, that proves right there that this is a true document. That the flood actually happened the way that it was told in this book. Okay? And that God really did confuse the languages at the Tower of Babel and sent them out. And our world was radically changed for many years. And that's the point that we're trying to make, is that the only ones living in a cult are these guys. Outside of, say, Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses, and one could argue maybe the Catholics. But the Catholics are more legalistic and ritualistic. They still believe in the same Jesus that other Christians do. They just believe more in the intercession of priests rather than you just going before God on your own, bowing down and saying, God, forgive me, I'm a sinner. They believe that you need a priest. Okay? But Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons are truly a cult, okay? They have the cult-like behavior. They're the ones that teach their people. This whole notion of, oh, if you're in a religion, you're in a cult. No. Because there are billions of people around the planet that are in religions that have nothing to do with Christianity, Islam, or Judaism, okay? There's billions in Hinduism, because there's billions of people in India, okay? There's billions of people that believe in Buddhism, okay? There's Shinto. There's different religions in different cultures all over the world, okay? So, just automatically ascribing cult-like attributes to any religion quickly leads to a slippery slope to where now you're trying to say that every single religion, anywhere, at any time on the planet is a cult. And that, by very definition, includes evolution, because you guys don't have any evidence to back up your claims. Okay? And so the very reason why we, as Christians, kind of push back on that is because we're saying you guys are believing in the same type of religious beliefs that we believe in, because you have less evidence than we do, because we have a mountain of evidence backing up this book, and you have none backing up your theory. You have a bunch of lines on paper, you claim to have fossils, you claim to have papers that are written by men, which is so hilariously hypocritical when you say, well, the Bible was written by men, but, I trust Darwin. Okay, you trust one man over people divinely inspired? over a book that's never changed in 2,000 years? Really? That's what you're going with? It doesn't make any sense, folks. It really doesn't. I mean, it's pathetically inane to think that they can sit there and go, well, see, we know this, but we think it's this way. It's pathetic. It doesn't make any sense. Okay? It really, really doesn't. Okay? It's got to stop. It really does.
So Dr. Scaramanga, who produced this study, published it in the academic journal Cultural Studies of Science Education. She is hoping that the rules can be changed to improve the prospects of children in these systems. Frankly, when I was reading this, the first thing that sort of came to me was like, is that legal? Can that be legal in the UK in 2023? Excluding the legal requirement for a broad and balanced science curriculum, which is extremely vague in its wording, it's essentially they can basically teach whatever they want. There are guidelines for independent schools. This is guidance.
So basically, like for instance here, I can't speak for the UK, but here in America, our Department of Education lays out a broad-based guideline for what education requirements are necessary for anybody to get into any college anywhere in the United States. Okay? And to be able to meet those guidelines, you have to graduate, and they're basically, you have to have, out of high school, you have to have 3 years of math minimum. You have to have 3 years of science minimum. You have to have at least 2 to 3 years of history or social studies. You have to have 4 years of English. You have to take an English class every single year. Plus, you have to have like a certain number of what they call elective credits, okay? Things like drama, PE, that kind of stuff. Art, okay? That's what they call a diploma-based education system, okay, in the United States. And you also have to have 2 years of a foreign language. So basically, what you have to do in that 3 years of science is they get, in 9th grade, they take an earth science class. 10th grade, they take biology. And 11th grade, they get to choose if they want to take, like, I think it's like, there's like chemistry, and then there's like a couple of other classes. There's like chemistry, physics, and like one other. And they can choose which ones they want to do. And then as electives, people can actually go in and like choose certain classes. Okay, so for an elective, if you got 3 years of a certain of science, if you wanted to take physics, then you could take physics. But most people choose not to. Most people would just choose to take their 3 years of science and then, choose something else. And a lot of people were like, I'm sure a lot of people who aren't living in the United States probably look at that and go, oh, that's kind of weird. But what that does is it gives people a nice broad base, okay? And generally what happens is if you go to a 4-year university in the United States, your first 2 years at that university are taking what's known as basic and breadth courses. And what that does is it gives a student 2 years to decide on a major, okay, and a minor. And so, like, typically people will find as they take those courses that something might appeal to them. Now, some people go into college knowing that they want to take certain courses, knowing that they want to do certain things, and so they head down a certain path. They'll still take those basic and breadth courses, but they'll intersperse them with courses that they know they're going to need for their major, okay? And typically in a college in the United States, you get an advisor, and that advisor, okay, typically will guide you in what courses you need to be able to graduate fairly on time. And once you get your major and your minor, you go graduate, you go walk across the stage, they hand you your diploma case, you walk off the stage, and then they send you your degree that says, you know, you graduated this college with this major and this minor and blah, blah, blah. It sounds like, and this is where my question comes back in for Emma and for anyone else watching who's an atheist, what do you consider a broad and basic science education? Because mandating that something that has not been scientifically proven in a lab, in ways that we can observe, is in no way teaching basic and broad science. Okay? Because this is one of the things that I see people talk about all the time. I hear atheists say all the time is, well, when we discover something new in the science, we change our theory to match. Here's the thing. Have you changed gravity? Have you changed chemistry? Have you changed physics? Outside of quantum physics, I'm talking about just normal physics. The universe is run by laws. Evolution is not a law. Okay? Because it's never been proven. Beyond just variations on a theme, which is not evolution. In fact, I was just thinking about this morning when I woke up, because I was thinking about this video, and I was thinking, it's funny how, a lot of people will say there's squirrels in the north, in the northern United States that will not interbreed with squirrels in the south. But there's squirrels in the middle of the country that squirrels in the north can mate with, and squirrels in the south can mate with, and they can mate with each other. And they use this as some kind of gotcha, as see, because these north squirrels don't mate with these south squirrels, see, they're completely different species, and so now, guess what? That's evolution. No, it's not. Because you haven't changed kinds, okay, they're still squirrels, and if you take a male squirrel from the north and a female squirrel from the south, or vice versa, male from the south, female from the north, and you were to breed them, either IVF or test tubes or whatever have you, you can still mix their genetic code and get a squirrel. It doesn't matter, because those squirrels can still mate. They're not different kinds of animals, okay, with different genes, okay? That's the point that we're trying to make, is that, and I'm thinking about this with our own species of humans, okay? There are people out there, normally, most people like to when they want to go out and find a spouse, they like to stay within their own ethnicity. It's not to be racist, it's not to be anything like that. It's just they like to be within their own ethnicity. Their own they like to, just because it's like, hey, it's comfortable, it's safe. But there are people out there that do go out and, and this is true of, you can go to Africa, right? There are many tribes in Africa that don't cross over, and you know, like villages that don't mix. Okay, they might be enemies, they might just be different cultures. Okay, but typically they won't go outside of that. Like, there are tribes that live along the Ivory Coast that might visit northern Africa, like Tunisia and Morocco, and they don't typically get married to any of those people. They like to stay within their own, because most of those people have much darker skin than the people in North Africa. Not to say that they wouldn't or that they couldn't. It's their preference, okay? Some Asians don't like to marry Westerners, or they don't like to marry they may not like African people. They may not like darker skinned people because they're very light skinned. They're very fair skinned, like Caucasian people. So they may not like to, you know, to maybe get married to someone with darker skin. But that's not to say that they couldn't. You see what I'm saying? It boils down to, and that's why I was saying before, you could almost say that every single different shade of skin could be construed as a different species because of how they adapted to their circumstances. Because, like, people in Africa have much darker skin because of where they live. The sun is much stronger, okay? And so their skin, and they don't wear many clothes because it's much hotter. So their skin is super dark because they have a lot of melanin. Whereas, like, my ancestors came from Northern Europe, okay? They're very fair-skinned, okay? I mean, you can see I'm white, okay? And that's because the people there didn't... The sun was gone most of the year. They didn't... You know, during the summertime, I tan up fairly well because I go outside and I do things outside. And so I get a little tan, but then, you know, about 2 or 3 months into fall, when I start to cover up because it gets cold, I tend to, like, get, you know, I tend to go kind of white again, you know, and that's because of where we live on the earth. We, you know, as you go farther and farther north in the latitudes, the sun doesn't shine as much. And also because, like, a lot of my ancestors were from the UK, there was not, you know, there's a lot more rainy days, and so people tended to kind of cover up. So they didn't get as much sun. Okay? And so you can kind of see that throughout history, okay, throughout where people went after Noah's Ark. And so the point being that, again, I'm not being racist, I'm just saying that you could almost consider every single one of those a different species in a way, but no species is different than the other so much that we can't interbreed, because we have. Okay? I mean, there's tons of, you know, mulatto people here in the United States because we've had a lot of, you know, mixed couples, okay, interracial couples. And we've had a lot of, you know, there's a lot of, like, half Asian, half white kids. There's a lot of, you know, half black, half Asian kids because of those kinds of interracial linkages, okay? So it's not like we can't go out and, like, go to Africa and find somebody and not be able to mate with that person, okay? We may choose not to do that. They may choose not to come here and try to find someone, and that's totally fine. But that doesn't mean that we can't do it, if that makes sense, okay? And that's the point, is you're talking about when you start talking about evolution and you start talking about macroevolution, you have to start talking about changing kinds. And that means a change in chromosomes count. That means a change in sex gametes. That means a change in physical phenotype appearance. That means a change in actual, like, physiological changes, like your muscle structures, your bone structures, everything like that has to change. And you're talking physical changes that have to happen to make something, do something. And it's so funny because you'll say, well, then how does a cow become a whale? And these evolutionists will say, well, that didn't happen. Well, yes, that's what your side is talking about. Your side is saying that, Bossy the cow became Blowhole the whale. How did that happen? And when we say there had to be some kind of half cow, half whale hybrid, people go, well, that's not how evolution works. Then explain to us, how does that work? And not one has explained how that works. All they say is, that isn't how that works. That isn't an argument. That is a cop-out. That is you saying, I don't know how, so I'm just going to say it's not how it works. And then I get to sit back and laugh in your face because you're stupid. Because I get to sit there and go, ha ha ha, joke's on you. Because now what you're doing is you're pushing a narrative. And you're trying to just say, I may not know how it works, but you can't question the narrative. That's cult-like behavior.
For independent schools published by the government, the UK government, independent school standards. Number 2.8 is what I want to draw your attention to. Independent schools may teach creationism as part of a belief system, but it should not be presented as having a similar or superior evidence base to scientific theories. That is 100% absolute.
Okay. So she put up this thing about independent schools may teach creationism as part of a belief system, but it should not be presented as having similar or superior evidence base to scientific theories. On the other hand, schools should not suggest that those who hold to creationist beliefs are not worthy of request. Okay? So, basically what happened to the gal earlier on in this video, okay, when that gal was kind of unceremoniously not chucked out, but like not accepted into schools because of this ACE curriculum, okay, that was an oversight of this rule right here. Because here again it says you can't hold these people away from your schools for holding a different belief than you. And that's why I've said it's not that people can't teach evolution. It's not that you shouldn't know about the theory of evolution. But a scientific theory is a far cry from a scientific fact or law like gravity. Okay? And the problem with this standard is that it's basically saying that this theory of creationism is less valid than the theory of evolution. Because the theory of evolution has people like Richard Dawkins who sit there and say, God is a monster, you should never believe in God, and evolution is the only way. And by the way, he does actually believe in intelligent design. If you watch this movie, which I've recommended 100,000 times. Okay? Because again, Ben Stein is not going around saying creationism is the only thing that should be taught in schools. Or evolution should be the only thing taught in schools. He's saying all of the theories should be presented equal measure across the board. Okay? You should have evolution, you should have creation, and you should have in the middle intelligent design. Because one of the things that she failed to mention was that during her presentation on Fred Hoyle was that Sir Fred Hoyle was an intelligent design proponent. He was saying that, perhaps if it didn't happen by evolution, perhaps it happened by panspermia. It came from elsewhere in the cosmos. Which is part of the belief of evolution and cosmic evolution. Okay? They believe that meteorites with somehow had, polymers on them, or somehow had molecules on them that crashed into the Earth before the atmosphere got too thick, and then once rain made itself and started falling down, it rained on the rocks for millions of years and created pools, and then there were volcanic vents down at the bottom of these oceans, and near these volcanic vents or in these shallow ponds somewhere, somehow and as if by magic, everything got together. That's what your side believes. Part of that is panspermia, because you're trying to mitigate the problem of how do we say that life originated when all we say was that the Earth was a hot molten mass and then it turned into a rocky crust. How do we say, if there's no organic compounds in these rocks, how do we say that those compounds got there to be able to make the proteins and the DNA necessary to make life? And so they say meteorites hit it, or they'll say something along those lines. Or sometimes they'll say that the second planet that blasted into the Earth while it was still molten and created the moon and created this and created that had some of the molecules on it necessary for life, and that's how life got started. They have some of the wildest theories out there, but those theories are no less valid than my theory that there's an all-creating, all-knowing, omnipotent God who spoke the universe into being. How is that different? Because you fundamentally believe in the same creation type thing. You just want to say that there was no agent for that creation, that the universe just created itself from a big bang out of nothing, which goes against physics.
Absolutely not being followed by the ace schools. Not in any way. It's not just teaching that evolution is an inferior theory, it's teaching that it's wrong, a conspiracy. Evolutionists are evil and...
No, that's not what we're saying. We're not saying you guys are evil. What we are saying is that you guys are pushing a theory that has done nothing to solve anything in science. And even mainstream scientists will say, okay, because Kent Hovind has millions of quotes on this, okay? Well, maybe not millions, but hundreds of quotes on this, of people, actual physical atheists who believe in evolution, that say that the theory of evolution has done nothing to further the advancement of science. Because without the theory of evolution, we still would have gotten computers, we still would have gotten, all these different things, because even before evolution was popular, we were still making scientific advancements. Okay? I mean, it's not, we're not saying that you atheists out there, you're all evil for teaching this. No, we're not saying that, okay? What we're saying is that your theory doesn't do anything but rob people of the hope that's in Jesus Christ. Okay? Because if evolution is true, answer me this. If evolution is true, and there was billions of years of evolution before, there was a flood, there was anything else, before there was any of the Bible, then what is the point of Jesus dying on the cross? Because you have billions of years of deaths before you had original sin. from the first man and the first woman that descended from monkeys. And I'm going to say it. They descended from monkeys. You can say it was a monkey-like ancestor, but it was descended from monkeys. Shut the fuck up. Okay? You believe you're apes, basically. Okay? You want to believe you're an ape? Fine. But you wonder why people go ape shit in schools when you teach them that all they are is animals. Go fucking figure. What is the point of the punishment for sin? What is the point of having a savior from that sin? What was the point of having Jesus come and die on the cross and get resurrected 3 days later to save you from your inherent sin nature if there was billions and billions of years of death before there was even the first sin? Jesus' death and resurrection serves no purpose at that point. It becomes a worthless story. Okay? That is evil. You trying to say that this is just a fairy tale, okay, that has no basis in reality, is not only willingly ignorant of all of the actual archaeological and anthropological evidence that backs up the Bible, but it's also an affront to Jesus. Okay? And even so, Jesus even said, if you cause one of these little ones to stumble, it would be better for you to have a millstone hung around your neck and drown in the depths of the sea. Okay? And that's Jesus saying that because he's basically trying to say that these people are my children, and you doing this, okay, it's wrong and it's evil. Now on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. As he was going into a village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance and called out in a loud voice, "Jesus, Master, have pity on us." When he saw them, he said, "Go and show yourselves to the priests." And they went, and they were cleansed. One of them, when he saw he was healed, came back praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him, as he was a Samaritan. Jesus asked, "Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Was no one found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner?" Then he said to him, "Rise and go, your faith has made you well." Sorry, wrong one. Jesus said to his disciples, "Things that cause people to sin are bound to come, but woe to that person through whom they come. It would be better for him to be thrown into the sea with a millstone tied around his neck than for him to cause one of these little ones to sin. So watch yourselves. If your brother sins, rebuke him, and if he repents, forgive him. If he sins against you 7 times in a day, and 7 times comes back to you and says, 'I repent,' forgive him." Okay? So, basically, what Jesus is saying there, and I'm sorry I read the wrong story. What Jesus is saying there, well, it's also kind of relevant, but what Jesus is saying there is that there is inevitability in our lives because of our inherent sin nature that we're going to cause people to stumble. And if we refuse to repent, which means turn around and go in the opposite direction of the direction that you're going in, if we refuse to repent, then and we cause the little ones, and he's talking about the children, to stumble, okay, to sin, then it would be better for that person to be thrown into the sea with a millstone tied around his neck than for him to cause one of these little ones to sin. So watch yourselves. Okay? And that's basically what Jesus is saying in that particular, point. Now let me just I think Matthew's is a little bit different here. Yeah. So, in Matthew 18, in Matthew 17, Jesus heals a boy, demon-possessed boy. Then they talk about the temple tax, and that's where Jesus says, go down to the shoreline, catch a fish, pull it out, you'll find the temple tax that you need. Because some people were like, hey, doesn't your teacher pay the temple tax? And Peter's like, yeah. But then he walks into the house and he's like, Jesus, are we paying the temple tax? And Jesus is like, who does Caesar collect the taxes from? Does he collect it from his own sons or from others? He's like, from others. And he's like, oh, so his sons are exempt. But should you want to pay the temple tax, go right down there and do that. Then he says, at that time the disciples came to Jesus and asked, who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? He called a little child and had him stand among them. He said, I tell you the truth. Unless you change and become like a little child, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever welcomes a little child like this in my name welcomes me. But if anyone causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him to have a large millstone hung around his neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea. Woe to the world because of the things that cause such people to sin. Such things must come, but woe to the man through whom they come. If your hand or your foot causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life maimed or crippled than to have 2 hands or 2 feet and be thrown into the eternal fire. So basically, Jesus is teaching there that if you want to go to heaven, you have to become like a child, okay? That means you have to rely on God, on Jesus, on others. You have to be willing to accept those teachings, and you have to be willing to understand that you don't know everything, okay? Because true children learn when they realize that they don't know everything and that they can look up to others to learn how to learn, okay? And so that's what Jesus is saying there. Is he's saying if you're causing these little ones to sin, okay, rebel against God, then it's better for you to tie a millstone around your neck and be drowned in the depths of the sea. Because that's what we're calling evil. We're not calling you, specifically as atheists, evil. What we're saying is what you're teaching children is evil.
And it's impossible and ridiculous. Like, that is the most flagrant disregard of this guidance that you could possibly have. Sky News contacted all 11 schools affiliated with ACE, requesting an interview about the science curriculum, but none responded, which is pretty standard. To freeze out journalism on issues like this is quite normal in this kind of situation.
Gee, I wonder why. With the way that journalism is, and I'm going to just straight up say it, across the globe, okay? Especially here in America and over in the UK with and up in Canada, with the way that the left-leaning media is and how anti-religion they truly are, minus maybe Islam, they tend to really portray people that teach this kind of stuff in a very unflattering light. So let me put it to you this way. If I were to call you, okay, and I were to say, hi, I'm from Fox News and I'm doing a report on the effects of your curriculum versus, say, a more religious curriculum, and I'm doing an expose on, on these different schools that are teaching this curriculum, that are teaching this evolution curriculum, which has caused school shootings, which has caused this very thing to happen, would you like to comment? You'd probably say, hell no. Because you know that my bias is showing, okay? And 90% of the time, these schools can literally cut through the bullshit, okay? And they can see what these different things are going on, okay? And so they're not going to answer back. Because why? Why would you? Why should you? Can you answer me that? No? Oh. Maybe that's because if the roles were reversed, you would probably not respond to a journalist who was going to write an unflattering article about evolution in schools and how detrimental it is to kids' mental health and, and why kids are going, crazy in schools and why there's school shootings are on the rise and why there's different things like that. You would probably say the same thing. You would probably clam up and not want them to write back. Not want them to write that article. Okay? So, she just posted up this little headline thing here. It says a Department for Education spokesperson said independent schools were free to set their own curriculum but must meet the independent school standards. That's what they do here in the United States. And that's what ACE bases their curriculum standards for, is those independent school standards. Okay? Now, I don't know what the laws are in the UK, but like here in America, if a child were to be homeschooled under the ACE program and a college found out about it and cut that kid, did not allow them to enter the school, that kid has the legal right to sue them under the First Amendment of the Constitution. Okay? Religious liberty. That's what I'm saying. I don't know what the standards are in the UK. But here in America, okay, and this has happened. I'm not gonna go out and try to find every single, thing, but you can Google it. But there have been people that have been let go for them professing religious things or, them trying to teach religious things, and they end up winning, okay? Sometimes they lose, sometimes they win. It depends on the judge, and it depends on their interpretation of the First Amendment. Because what most people get wrong is that the separation of church and state under what they call separation of church and state under the First Amendment was not actually the actual First Amendment. Because the First Amendment says that the actual First Amendment says that the people under the government shall make no law, okay, prohibiting or establishing a religion, any religion. And the government cannot prohibit the free exercise thereof. Which means that I'm free to promote my religion wherever. You're free to promote your religion wherever, be it atheism, be it evolution, be it whatever you want to call it. Okay? The problem comes in when, under Brown versus Board of Education, okay, that statute, or something happened, and some people took them to court, and they took a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to a bishop, okay, and because the bishop had written Thomas Jefferson and said, yo, I'm kind of concerned about this First Amendment thing that you've proposed. okay? Because it sounds like, if perverted, the government could, restrict our rights to exercise, or it could even establish its own religion in a way. And basically, Thomas Jefferson wrote back to the bishop and said, no, our goal with the First Amendment is to create a wall of separation of church and state, so that what happened in England under the Anglican Church, which is why the Pilgrims left England on the Mayflower and came across to the United States. At the time, it was British colonies, but they came across the United States because they were like, we're getting away from these people. We're getting away from underneath this thing. And when we separated and created our own country in 1789, when we created the Constitution, there was no protection for freedom of speech, for freedom of religion, right to bear arms, the right to a free trial, right to a speedy trial, right to a trial of your peers. The first 10 amendments were basically added on almost immediately right after the Constitution itself. In fact, if you go to the National Archives in Washington, D.C., and look at the Constitution, you will see the Constitution, and right next to it you will see the Bill of Rights. The first 10 amendments to the Constitution, which is known as the Bill of Rights. And basically what that was doing is it was establishing individual rights under the Constitution. Okay? But nowadays, a lot of people have taken the First Amendment to mean freedom from religion. Okay? And that's what I'm saying. I don't know what it is in England, but see, like in America, if I filled out an application, okay, and I sent it to a college, and that college comes in and says, and I send them my transcript, and they say, oh, you took the ACE curriculum, we're denying your application. Bam. Okay. I could take them to court, legally, under the First Amendment, to say that I am free in this country to exercise my right to religion, and if that includes my schooling, okay, then I'm allowed to go and do that, no matter what. Okay, I can do that. And the people, normally, under the First Amendment of the Constitution, a judge will usually say, you're correct. Okay? This became a huge fight when a gal there was a baker in Colorado, there was a gal in Washington State, ironically enough where I live, that were taken to court because they refused to serve homosexuals in their businesses. Okay? Under the First Amendment of the Constitution, now a lot of people would scream, probably yelling at me right now, decrying it, saying discrimination. It's not. Because in America, under the free market capitalist system, if there's a business that doesn't want to do business with you, then guess what you're free to do? You're free to take your business elsewhere. Okay? But what you do not get to do is tell a business owner how they get to run their business. Because under the First Amendment of the Constitution, they have freedom of speech and they have freedom of religion. Okay? And you have freedom of protest. You can protest that business. Okay? You can say, this business doesn't want to do business with me. Protest this business. Like America did with Bud Light. And Target. Okay? And now they're doing with Disney. Basically, that's what's happening. Okay? You're free to do that. But what you're not free to do is take that person to court and say, they have to serve me. They have to bend to my will because my will is more than their religious freedom. You do not get to do that under the First Amendment of the Constitution. Okay? And because, like, I have a friend who's gay. We differ a lot on views. He claims to be a Christian. He's really not, because he believes that this says homosexuality is okay. It does not. He's free to hold those views, even though they're heretical. I'm not going to begrudge him that. Because we're friends. It's a live and let live policy. I told him a long time back, I said, you're free to believe what you want to believe. Just don't tell me that it's true. Because I know the truth, because I have the Bible, and I've read the Bible. I know what the Bible says about homosexuality. I'm sorry, it doesn't say what you think it says. But that being said, as soon as this story broke on this gal, my friend was like, oh my gosh, she's such an evil person, blah, blah, blah. And I said, no, she's not. I said, she is free to refuse, under the First Amendment, the right to serve anyone in their place. I said it would be no different if I walked in, let's say, you had a cake business, and I walked into your cake business, and I said, hey, I want you to make me a cake for my straight wedding, and you said, I don't want to make a cake for your straight wedding, I only make cakes for gay weddings. I would say, okay, man, hey, that's cool, I'm going to go elsewhere. And I would take my business elsewhere. That's what you're free to do. You do not get to sit there and try to tell people how they get to do things. And so, if it is true that this woman and like I said, I don't know about the UK's laws, but if this woman was not allowed in to certain schools here in America because of the ACE curriculum, because she was being discriminated against because of that, under our First Amendment, under our laws, she could sue them. Now, she probably can't do that in the UK because the UK has completely different laws than what's here in America. But I'm saying that if that woman was discriminated against because she took that ACE schooling, and that's what I was trying to bring up in that first few episodes, that is pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. Okay? I'm going to let this go a little bit longer, and then we'll call it an episode.
A Department for Education spokesperson did say that independent schools were free to set their own curriculum but must meet the independent school standards. Clearly ACE schools are not, so whether they're actually going to investigate and do anything about it remains to be seen. The best we can do is make this information as mainstream as possible in the hope that that provokes them into doing something.
Well, it depends on what the ACE schooling is doing, in your opinion. If they are teaching a fair and balanced science curriculum, okay, which it sounds like they are, and maybe they're not teaching evolution to the level that maybe you want it to be, doesn't matter. As long as they're meeting those independent school standards, and again, I don't know what those are, as long as the ACE curriculum is meeting those standards, and see, this is the problem that I have with these atheists. She's saying, oh, they must do this, and they're not investigating, they're not doing this, they're not doing that. I can guarantee you, if ACE is still being put forth in your school, in your country, okay, the independent school board's systems has to clear every single curriculum that comes across, okay, and so they've looked at the ACE curriculum and they've said, yeah, it meets the minimum standards. What more do you want? Okay? That's the point. Now, maybe it's not to the level, and maybe, like I said before, maybe some of the standards, they changed some of the standards to try to force the ACE curriculum to try to teach more about evolution. I don't know. But that's different than the independent school systems standards saying, here's our list of standards, and ACE goes, okay, let's see here. We check that box, 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 we check that box. Okay, box is checked, we're good. And then they send their curriculum to the independent school board, and they go, yep, they meet standard. What do you want? This is the problem that we start to have with this kind of crap, is that she's not posting the standards, she's not bringing up the standards, what the standards are, she's not showing, like, what the actual ACE system does, okay? She's not showing anything. She's shown a few pictures from ACE stuff and then made fun of it, okay? or tried to say citation needed, and then she turns around and goes, but, this is what the independent school board says, and then ignores the last part of it, which basically says, hey, just because people view creationism over evolution doesn't mean that they're not worthy of respect and not worthy of being included in school. You just ignore all of that, throw all of that out the window, and now you're not even showing what the standards for the independent school board is. Which means that if ACE is still being taught in your school system, or even homeschooling system, okay, and people are using the program and getting in, with the exception of that one lady, if they're using it and they're getting into schools and they're doing well academically, then that means that they're meeting the standards set by that board, which means you can't complain about it because they're doing what you want them to do. I mean, it is so hypocritical. It is so cultish the way that you're acting, because you are basically saying, if you're not thinking the same way that I am, okay, then you have to be ostracized from society because you don't believe in evolution the way that I believe in evolution. That's cultish behavior. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, drop a comment below, let me know what you think of the series so far. We have about 11 minutes left. Hopefully we'll be able to get through this in another video or two, probably 2 more videos, and then I have another video past this, and and then we'll take a look at that one. And like I said on the Christy Burke video, if you'd like me to do another one of hers, after I get done with that one, let me know down in the comments below. And as we say, we will see you on the next one.